Welcome, welcome. It is now my privilege to introduce our third session of the day, Crafting Your Career Identity, the Art of Personal Branding. We are joined by a wonderful lineup of speakers today. Our host, Matthew James, Senior Solutions Engineer at Kodat, Tina Phillips, Director of Global Presales Consultants at ADP, Alex Stewart, Senior Solutions Engineer at Confluent, and Aditya Ahuja, Cloud Security Solutions Architect at Palo Alto Networks. I will pass it off to you, Matthew, to take it away.
Amazing. Thank you, Courtney. And thanks, Presales Collective, for getting us all together to talk about what is an amazing topic, personal branding. So, I guess just a quick thought to get us started. I've seen a lot happening in the realm of personal branding right now, especially in the B2B space. I think we're seeing it's more important than ever to figure out what your personal brand is, both internally and externally. And I think as well within solutions consulting, we're only going to see this get more important as well. So we've got the rise of personal branding, we've got the rise of solutions consulting, sets us up to have a really great conversation. And I'm sure there are a lot of people wondering where they fit in and how do we play our part in doing personal branding. So excited to be talking with Tina, Alex, and Aditya. Last thing I'll say, we are so well geographically represented. We've got the West Coast from Aditya. We've got the Midwest from Tina. I'm on the East Coast, and Alex is over in the UK. So really excited to have this full perspective from a regional standpoint. But let's dive right in. We'll be tackling three topics: the idea of establishing a personal brand and what is a personal brand. We'll get into using LinkedIn to build that personal brand. And then finally finish off with what in-person communities have to offer your personal brand. And I'll just say this for all of the audience members, please feel free to submit your questions. We'll be watching the chat and the Q&A the whole time, and we'll finish off with some time for questions. So first of all, I think it's good if we identify what is a personal brand and how we get there. And Tina, I know you had some thoughts on this, so I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of get us started.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as we all think about what our brand is, we sometimes struggle to tell everyone what our unique value proposition is. We'll say things like, I work hard, or I'm a positive person, but we fail to take that next step of saying how our behaviors are valuable, which is truly what your brand is. So brand needs to originate with us, it can change over time, but it needs to show that value. So I think the first way that we can identify that is to ask questions like, what's expected of me at my organization, or what are the major results that I want to deliver? And then think of choosing descriptors that might further enhance that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But if you think about conceptually completing the following sentence, I want to be known for X so that I can deliver Y. So that want to be known for is what's expected of you both in your industry, at your workplace, as your job, and that the delivery is the output of that. So for me, for example, I'm a leader of pre-sales consultants at a large organization. So my brand statement, or what I want to bring out into the world, is I want to be known for being a positive, results-oriented leader by delivering superior support to my sales organization. So that brings that value versus just saying, I want to work hard and I want to deliver results.
Yeah, I think that really resonates. So tying brand into value. And I think you said that really well. Tina, could you say your personal brand statement one more time? Because I think it's so powerful. And I'd be really interested to turn it over to Alex and Aditya to hear you guys and how you would define yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my brand statement that I portray out to both my industry and my colleagues at ADP is, I want to be known for being a positive, results-oriented leader by delivering superior support to our sales organization.
Wow. Yeah, that's so strong. I want to maybe dive into more of that, but Alex and Aditya, have you guys gone through an exercise like that? And what is your definition of your own personal brand?
Yeah, I think so. I was lucky. Someone called out mine when I was doing a hackathon event a few years ago. So anyone who's connected with me on LinkedIn has seen my tagline, like too young to talk about mainframes, too old to talk about blockchains. It gets a bit of a laugh, but also it comes from that, like, my personal brand. I want to be known as a thought leader. So, and to be able to look at niche or innovative technologies. So hearing someone say that, and I'll dive into this probably a bit later. Like hearing what people thought about me gave me a good sort of building block, a good base to build my own personal brand from when I knew I wanted to be a thought leader. And the question was about, about what. And I'll this year kind of speak to his as well.
Sure thing. Yeah. So we get to define our personal brand, I'd say, on a very frequent basis, just because of the kind of jobs that we do, right? In the pre-sales world, is that you're always meeting new people, you're always presenting. There's always a new person in the room whenever you're talking to a group of people, right? So the way I like to, whenever I'm introducing myself to even somebody internal to the company that I'm working with, or if I meet somebody at a conference or a summit or something like that, I'm like, I'm the kind of SE who wants to be known for being involved from early on, essentially. I would love to be involved in the business development process. I would love to come with you from the initial stages itself, because I love talking to people. I want to be out there with you, with the sales team, supporting from the get-go, from the ground up. So that's the kind of brand that I like to put forward from myself, is that bring me with you, let me help you from that initial stage itself. I love talking to people. It is, at first, it's a little uncomfortable when you're in a room when you don't know anybody, but then that's the beauty of it, where you end up learning so much, and then it's essentially getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. So that's the kind of brand that I strive to build for myself, and I think that's what I work towards all the time. So yeah, those were my 2 cents.
I think there's a good point at the end there as well. Like, being uncomfortable and what you're striving to learn. It's really good to have the personal brand for that, because then you know where to go. Like, if you want to be seen as the full cycle solution consultant, then you need to be, as part of your personal brand, seen as a solution consultant who's interested in the business. Otherwise, people will hide you away from it. Like, you miss the learning opportunity. So it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling thing as well, which can be quite interesting.
Right. I'd like to add to that, because that was so well said, in that, bring your genuine self out. So who you are as a person outside of work, right? As long as you stick to that, it would be so much easier to be that person professionally as well. Obviously, there's a line between personal and professional selves, but the foundational basis of how you are as a person, that would really start showing in your professional brand, and that should be aligned with how you are with friends, with communities outside of work, right? So yeah, so really something that I try to stick to for myself, essentially.
I would also add to that, part of the being uncomfortable with our brand is having the opportunity to test it with those around us. So once you've created that brand that you are building yourself towards, reaching out to folks to test it, to see if your brand and your perception of self is also that of those around you.
How have you done that in the past, Tina? I'm curious about that.
Oh, right. That's the $1 million question. And it's definitely uncomfortable. So I've got a few colleagues at both at work and outside of work that I can call or, reach out to say, this is what I'm building towards. This is what I've done to build towards it. Lay it on the line, be honest with me. Is that your perception of what I do? It's hard to do that, right? Like that's a big test of courage. But I think if you really want to develop and move that brand forward, that's an essential step.
That can be a very vulnerable thing, I'm sure. And I found myself in that situation, kind of transforming my own personal brand. Alex and Aditya, I mean, actually, let's start with you, Alex, because you said your brand was almost defined by someone you were working with. So what was that like? And have you received feedback on it since then?
Yeah, so I see myself as the sum of my parts. Like that tagline, that branding rather than just brand, comes from the history of where I've worked and what I was passionate about. Like back when I used to work at Splunk, I was a 25, 26-year-old, like I was a junior solution consultant, and I had big, scary strategic account owners coming to me and asking because they knew that I was the person who had a recent experience working on mainframes. And I think this is where to Tina's point, like have that safe space. I knew I had an internal brand where people would ask me about that. So that meant when I wanted to externalize it, when I wanted to take it to customers, or even out to, social networks, I had that brand kind of proven, and then I could play it back. And, over time, it's very much evolved. I've not seen a mainframe for about 5 years, but it still comes up in conversation. It's something I can kind of reflect on for the technology processes that happen behind it as much as the technology itself. And then, maybe you do change the tagline at some point. Companies change taglines all the time. Why shouldn't we change our own? But knowing the sum of the blocks that helps you build that new tagline or build that new personal brand, it's still important. So being able to just evolve it over time is as important as defining it in the first place.
Tell me more about that distinction between internal branding and then external when you take it outside.
So my reflection on this, at least, I'm not sure it's a McKinsey defined sort of definition. You're going to typically be your truer self with people you know. So that could be work colleagues. It could also be your social groups. It could be your societies and clubs and groups outside of work as well. But inside of those groups, we are many different faces of the same person. You're probably going to be the most true with your family, the second most true with your friends. And then eventually, when you're broadcasting to millions of people, your brand. Where you can find that defining point, they may even differ between the internal and the external, but the internal brand is potentially going to be like how you communicate with your colleagues. So I would say internally, that tech expertise is less about being contextual like it is in my external brand, and a lot more about being a coach. So can I go out to the sales team and help them get from a 101 level to a 201 level? Can I go to our SDR team and explain things to them so that they're giving us better pipes so my day job is easier? I want my personal brand to be known as an educator internally. Externally, it's something a bit different, but it comes from the same place. So it's just about understanding the relationship between those and sort of which circle, which tribe I'm presenting that brand to.
Aditya, I'm curious about your perspective on this when it comes to how you reflect your brand to specific groups of people. So you teed us up by saying one of the big things you do is go to your sales teams and you say, I want to be involved with the commercials up front as much as possible. As solutions consultants, we work with our sales teams and a broad variety of other teams. So tell us a little bit about how you think about that.
Sure thing. Yeah, I'll just build up on what Tina and Alex were talking about in the sense of that's where networking and having mentors and people that you can learn from comes in so much handy. Is that you try to test the waters first. You look, you learn, and you bring your own genuine self to how you want to portray yourself and what's acceptable in supposedly if you start at a new company, right? So that's where the whole networking piece comes in so handy, is that you see how other people are doing something at that company, and then how do you bring your own genuine self into that culture, and how do you build a culture also if that's something that you want to do there. Internally, again, as it's easier to kind of test the waters with people that you can be comfortable with. That could be friends, family, that could also be work colleagues, that could be teammates, that could be an SE buddy that your manager has aligned to you essentially to kind of do dry run demos with or something like that. So try to be that internally first, try to test the waters, try to see and have it evolve into your big brand that you then show externally. So that's what I've always done, is that the scenario where I start at a new place, right? I get a new job, I go into a new company. I first look and learn, because as SEs, we're always learning, right? There's new situations, there's different waters that we're trying to swim in. So look and learn, keep learning, but then be authentic to your genuine self. Don't change your genuine self. How do you mix those two and then take it outside when you're facing customers, when you're facing other teams externally, right? So that's what I've at a high level always tried to do. And yeah, those were a couple of points, and then I'll keep adding as more come to me along the way. So.
And Matthew, before
I
you
love that. Oh, go ahead, Alex.
I was going to say, Matthew, you have the brand of being New York City's solution engineer. Like, I kind of want to know where that came from as well.
Well, I think that there's an amazing tech community in New York City, and I find that as a big point of pride, as something to be involved with. And the other thing, so that's one side. And then the other side, with solutions consulting kind of having its golden moment, as I see it, I think that that's one way to kind of tie these two amazing things together and just get it out there. I go to events and I play this very silly card. That's kind of part of my personal brand, thinking about authenticity. I grew up doing theater, so I'm kind of used to putting myself out there. And so I'll go up to people and say, I'm here at this networking event to try and find another solutions consultant or another solutions engineer. I just want to meet as many people as possible. And it's kind of just like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe that's my way of testing it in the waters of NYC as a whole. I'm curious about hearing more about the authenticity side of this, because I think, Tina, you brought that up. Aditya, you've mentioned that. Before we move on to, I guess, the practicalities of how to actually do this.
Yeah, I can maybe start, but one of the graphics that's always stuck with me, and it's probably a good 10 to 12 years old at this point, but it was a Venn diagram where your brand is truly the intersection of yourself, what the organization needs from you, and what the industry needs from you. But at the center of it was your brand. And so you can't have a brand if you're taking yourself out of that Venn diagram, because it truly is a piece of it. So you can't create a brand that isn't authentic to you, because it's never going to stick.
Yeah, I'll add to that. That's so true, Tina. It's like if it's not authentic, it won't stick because you have to, you'll have to put in so much more work on a daily basis to put up that image, right? Which is not coming naturally. So, and then people can see through, something that's disingenuous essentially. But that's even more risky because then you do not want to come across as somebody who's putting on a face, right? So that's where, and then you do not have to be that outgoing person all the time. You do not have to make yourself into something or someone that you're not. Um, Whoever you are as a person, that's what should translate and be the foundation into what you build yourself a professional brand out of. So I just feel that just helps. That just helps keep up that professional brand that you're trying to build, essentially.
Amazing. Well, thanks for the thoughts on defining where we start with the personal brand, how we define it for ourselves, and how we test it out in the waters. So now let's get on to how we actually put this out into the world. So Tina wrote something really amazing in the chat. I think our external brand is becoming incredibly important as buyers are looking to get to know us as much as they know the salesperson selling to them. And we've got this great stat as well. According to LinkedIn, 90% of consumers prefer to do research online. So that means that both on a company level and on a personal level, especially when it comes to our kinds of sales, where the sales team is really a big part of the buying process, this is more important than ever. So let's start there. How do we go about leveraging LinkedIn, other professional networks to market the brand? And maybe I'll turn this one over to Alex to start.
Sure. Like I've said in other pre-sales conferences, like a pre-sales person's job is empathy and expertise. So the expertise piece, that's probably the first step on a platform like LinkedIn. It's pretty easy to go out and fill in your CV. You've probably used it to get recruited before. That's the easy part. Add some certifications, add your previous job. The next part there is proving your expertise. It's a great platform for sharing information on. Debatably, it's actually one of the best social media platforms because, Matthew, if you like my post, all your friends or connections see my post as well. So I'm not just proving my brand to my closed network of however many connections I have. I'm actually proving it to your or my second degree connections, your first degree connections as well, if you think it was engaging media. So that piece before about evolving your brands, there's barely a better test bed than LinkedIn, because if I post an opinion on there and it resonates, then I can tell that it resonates. I can, track the analytics if I'm that kind of person, but also I know that it's getting shared out and it's probably going to be a driver for further engagement as well. And when I see those good steps, those higher engaging posts, then that's going to help me pull out what my superpowers are. What are my differentiators? So I think that's the expertise side, but also if I pivot towards the empathy, like it's a social network, social comes first. There's an opportunity there to actually prove your brand by interacting with people. So asking questions in the comments of maybe influencers in your space, like if you're in a data company, comment on a data engineer's post, you open up polls, look at forums. There's so much opportunity there to not just test your brand as something that you're selling, but also something that you're building. Like use the learning opportunity to add to what exists in your brand as well, by taking advantage of what's available. Don't know if anyone else has anything they want to add on top of that.
I love those ideas, Alex. I am one to look at my profile on LinkedIn and feel pretty good about that, but I'm also not one to do a lot of posts. And so I think as our audience considers what they can do next to move past just having their resume or their CV be their profile, they can start with telling a story on their profile instead, but then also starting to do things as you suggested, like make posts, comment on other folks' postings, even do a poll. That's a great next step for them to start building that brand more and more.
Yeah, I could add a few thoughts to that. And as Alex and Tina were talking about forums, right? That's a great way. Go follow those relevant pages, right? Go follow relevant company pages, groups, hashtags. People you would not necessarily want to send a connect request to everybody that you haven't met, because you don't want to send out random connect requests. I mean, you could obviously, but then there are some that you're like, I want to know what this person posts, and I've seen some posts and I like them. I would love to follow these posts. So follow is a great option if you don't want to send them a connect request. Doesn't hurt in sending a connect request, but then following somebody is a good option as well, because then your feed is populated by whatever they're posting. One of the other things that I've seen essentially, and I've been involved with PreSales Collective for a couple of years now. So just communities like these, right? There are so many amazing SEs and salespeople on this in this group where they post questions sometimes that, hey, this is a situation that I came across, and this is my thought process around that. What are your thoughts? Feel free to share your thoughts. If you're passionate enough about that, don't shy away from putting in a comment with your thought, with your response to that, because then that starts a conversation and you might end up being such a good connection with somebody else, somebody like me who goes in and reads. If Tina and I weren't connected before and Tina goes in and posts a comment, right? And I really like the way she worded it. And I'm like, hey, Tina, I would love to connect with you because would love to talk more about this. So it's, again, that, that authenticity and that personality comes into place so much in this profession, essentially, where you've got to, it's a people facing job that we do, right? It's people selling to people. So how can you leave the people aspect out of something like that, right? You've got to bring your whole self to this kind of profession and translate that over to LinkedIn as well, where you go into LinkedIn where you're commenting and you're talking to people and you're starting conversations. I get connect requests sometimes from people saying that, hey, I saw you did this, and this at this summit that you presented at, right? Would love to connect and would just love to have you as a connection. And I'm like, this is such good initiative that somebody can take in just reaching out proactively and just having them as a connection, correct? So utilize LinkedIn for that. I do it for that for sure. And the other thing is, I was saying, following the company pages. If there's something that you like that you see and you want your connections to see that, go ahead and share that. So there's a difference between sharing and reposting on LinkedIn that I was thinking this was a 1 a.m. thought, essentially. I'm like, there's I repost and I share. What's the real difference? Like, this was a 1 a.m. thought. I was having a hard time going to sleep. So sharing is, if you share a post, you start a new thread, essentially. You share it with your connections and you start it as a post of your own. It's still the original author's post, but you start a new thread on that. When you repost something, it's like you're building on that conversation that somebody else initiated, the author initiated. So when you repost it, It comes on your profile. Other people can comment on it and see it, but then they can still start a conversation with you. So that's something, those are two good ways you can share or repost things that you like. And just contribute to conversations, contribute to discussions, start building those networks, see the people that you like, their thought process that they're posting on these posts, send them a connect request, say a quick hello, just find out what they're doing, things like that. So yeah, just long-winded, but yeah, that's just some of my quick thoughts essentially.
I'd just like to, just based on some of the comments coming through on the chat as well, I'm conscious that some companies do restrict what you can talk about at your company level, especially. I guess that makes sense if you, especially if you're in a very regulated industry. I have always kind of set the rule that my company gets at most one post from me a week of like marketing stuff, because that's not my brand, that's someone else's brand. The sweet spot would be, can I talk about our industry? Like if someone came to my page, do they know that I care about the rest of the industry? But also I try and post once or twice a month about running, because running is also a big part of my personal brand. It's how I even connect with my customers. Hopefully employers are not stopping you posting about the skills you can learn by going for a marathon training plan or doing couch to 5K. Like LinkedIn has the opportunity to show the other professional sides of you, as well as your like core like day-to-day job. You know, if you wrote a CV, you would have your other details or other interests section at the bottom. LinkedIn can still be that and still be a good way of presenting your brand, that in maybe a slightly different way than, you know, someone who is a evangelist at a given company is obviously going to have a very specific, very targeted brand. You can be a lot more flexible as long as you're allowed to post, obviously.
Yeah, I think that's a great thought, Alex. Both you and Aditya kind of hit on this idea that your profile and your posts, it's not really just one thing in a vacuum. You're kind of creating this whole brand through every engagement that you make, every follow that you have. And since this is the Career Navigator Summit, I just wanted to give us the chance to give some stories or think about how, let's say, either your personal brand or the personal brand of someone you've been looking to hire has come and impacted that process. Maybe while you guys digest that, I'll say this. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Whenever a new role comes up on our website and we get applications, one of the first things that we do is go onto someone's LinkedIn, because it lets you know not only their experience, but it also lets you know how they think about themselves, their tone of voice, what the skills are that they're really bringing to the surface. And I guess to Alex's point, if there are those extra bits, if we can see that someone's gone through marathon training, maybe that helps us frame how we're going to have a conversation, know what to expect. So curious if you guys have run into that either in your own career journeys or when hiring for a role.
Oh, I think 100%. I I don't know anyone who doesn't, who's been part of a hiring team. The other thing I'd probably raise as well is there's people I look to for inspiration, like purely through LinkedIn. I'm not sure if anyone on here knows Samir, who used to do a lot in the pre-sales collective community and is now a founder of a company, so he's quite busy. There's a bit less than he used to, but Samir like tapped into the meme culture of pre-sales and the opinion culture of pre-sales, and I learned how to adjust my tone of voice by looking at what he was posting. So as much as I was going out and researching other people to, you know, be they customers or be they new hires, equally I was making myself better, hopefully, by looking at what someone who was like quite an inspiring poster was doing as well. So it can be like very multifaceted, kind of what you're using LinkedIn for.
I like that, Alex. As a leader, as a hiring manager, I have been surprised over the last 18 months on a few candidates who didn't have a LinkedIn presence, or quite literally just had the employment titles and dates of employment. So in this day and age, with our brands and with LinkedIn being the primary source that we're finding candidates, if you don't have a profile, if it's not a compelling profile, I would definitely start there and make sure you've got one.
Yep. I'd add a few thoughts as in, you know, how I use LinkedIn for anybody new that I'm trying to connect to, essentially. Like that could be at a new company also. And it's just a personal example is from about 3-ish years ago when I started at a new company. When you start at a new place, you're looking for people who can mentor you, who you could rely on, who you could learn from, right? So one of the managers at the company, I saw on their profile that they were a part of PSC, Pre-Sales Collective, in the past, and they were a career advisor, and just they stayed involved. So I'm like, if this person is a part of a community like this, right, they would be so much open to mentoring me, maybe. So I could probably reach out to them and just have this as a talking point. So when I talked to them, I brought up PSC. I said, "Hey, I saw your profile. Um, I um, uh, I was hanging out on your profile for a little bit, not trying to be a creep, but yeah, just trying to get to know you. And I saw PSC. So are you involved with Pre-Sales Collective?" So they said that yes, I was involved with them for a couple of months. Right now, I've taken a little bit of a break, but yeah, and they turned out to be such a good mentor, and I'm still connected to them till date. So that's something that they built their brand on through LinkedIn by posting about being involved with PSC. And then somebody like me who was new at the company, he picked it up from their LinkedIn, and then that started that connection, and so something that again it says that how do you build that brand on LinkedIn, and then how somebody like me who's looking for help, they can go utilize that, and then we can probably trade ideas based off of that. So
Yeah, you've touched on a point there of this is an investment. Like I've recently had a new manager come in, and he saw me speak at a pre-sales related conference last year. He's read my PSC blog post. So the week that he started, one of the first people he spoke to was myself, because that 2-3 years of activity in the pre-sales collective and my LinkedIn presence that he could look back and kind of build a profile of me from meant he knew who I was. So I guess the inverse side of what you were going through, it's great to know that a blog post or a conference that I wrote 6 months ago was having a positive impact 6 months later. It was paying its dividends. This might not immediately mean that suddenly everyone in the world wants to listen to your opinion just because you've posted a couple of LinkedIn blog posts, but the chances are it's going to compound over time and give you more opportunity as you scale up your career.
What an amazing example, I guess, of your external and internal brands kind of coming together back for you. I think that's such a great takeaway, that it is really an investment, and you never know what's going to happen. It's kind of like any of those big moments in your career. Sometimes they're just not predictable. So the idea of an investment is such a good one. We have one more topic to touch on before we move on to audience Q&A, and I see a couple of questions coming through. So if you have any other topics for our panelists to discuss, drop that in the Q&A. But Aditya, I want to turn this one over to you. Let's talk a little bit about, once we've defined our brand, once we've started to get ourselves out there on LinkedIn, how can we use that to kind of crystallize within communities, either online or in person, especially, to build your personal brand and get benefits out of it?
yeah, sure thing. So first step, as you said, was LinkedIn, right? You build your virtual online brand essentially, and then you go out. How can you do something locally, right? And this is something that I've relied on so many times, and I still rely on this. My one thought process is I live in San Francisco, so I'm like, if I'm paying so much to just live here, let me utilize all of the community that the city has to offer, right? Um, so one thing I say, network, 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 and that's with exclamation marks after each of those. So again, use your authentic self, go out and seek people. It might be hard at first if you're not used to that, but then it would become easier, because then you would start meeting a community, you would start interacting with people who are like-minded, who are maybe not like-minded, and you can learn something from them, and you can probably change your brand and thought process if you like that. But just be proactive, right? One thing, I'll share a personal story here, and this is a little bit long-winded, so that's why I was dampening my throat. um, so, um, so the way I got involved with Pre-Sales Collective is that this was through an in-person networking exercise that I did. So some of you might have heard of the Grasshopper conference. It's a women-focused conference, but then when I started at one of the companies a couple of years ago as a fresh grad out of grad school in a pre-sales role, they were kind enough to send all of us who were new grads to this conference in Houston, Texas, Grasshopper, right? And we were representing the company at the booth because there's a couple of students, there's a couple of professionals who come to that conference, trying to get to know about companies, trying to look for job opportunities. So I was just walking around the expo floor and I came across this one company. I wouldn't name them, but they had a booth and we were like, oh, what do you guys do? And then the SE who was at the booth, they said that, we're local to San Francisco and what do you guys do? So I introduced myself. I said, hey, I'm a new SE at this company. And I would love to connect. And they said that, are you aware of this meetup group that happens in the Bay Area? I'm going to focus my example to San Francisco and the Bay Area because I live here, but then obviously there's similar groups in other cities and other countries, obviously. So they said that, do you know of this group? And I said, I do not, but would love to connect and would love to come by. So they sent me a link to this through Meetup. It was through Meetup back then. And they said that we do an event once every quarter. It's one of the startups here that invite people over they just use their cafeteria space essentially, and then bring people in there where people from different companies, they come in there. There's a panel speaker, there's a couple of speakers. And it's just, pizza and beers and just probably seltzers. And then it's a networking event. You just get to meet the local SEs. So that's where and then I did that for a couple of months. And then from there, I got to know of PreSales Collective, that there's this company that very fine individuals have started that you can be a part of. So that's how I got involved with this whole community of SEs, which is, such a niche job and such a niche society, I would say. So that's where the whole importance of trying to connect with your local community comes from, right? There's meetup groups, there's user groups. If there's a technology, if there's a space that you're interested in, there are user groups that you can look for. That's just a group of users of that technology, of that product, it does not have to be technology related. Obviously, it could be anything. There's user groups that meet most times, probably once every quarter or something like that. You could be a part of those. From there, you can start building your network. And so yeah, that's a couple of thoughts. I'll let Tina and Alex, probably Matthew, jump in also, and then would share probably one or two more thoughts after.
Matthew, I'll let you jump in first if you had thoughts there.
Well, I was curious, Tina, if you've seen this come back. I know you just came back from our conference. So how do you see your personal brand playing out in that scenario?
That's a great question. So it's I got to take a step back because we were very busy at the booth at the conference and got to put my pre-sales hat back on and do a fair number of demos. But then I also got to do a presentation to the audience about how AI is being used in HR products. So it was very different to step out of my leader brand, which I've been embedded in for the past 8 years, and really truly step back into that externally speaking and demoing role. So I think what that says to me is we have to be flexible. So while we have one person and one authentic self and we have one brand, that brand can morph based on the situations that you're in or the networking events that you're in as well.
I think as well, the morphing isn't just on us. Like sometimes it's about morphing the event a little bit. So I'm going to bring up running again. Apologies to anybody else who doesn't want to hear about it, but my running club has a bunch of recruiters. So we've helped people, find jobs, but also I've ended up bumping into someone who is a potential customer at my run club before. And then from there, we've built out a relationship to actually get into that company. I've been recently been at a big fintech event in Amsterdam as a data company. So we weren't there to sell a finance product, but we're there to talk to finance people. And I think there's a trick there when you're in these communities is don't necessarily go to a pre-sales community and expect to find the perfect job. you have to be flexible, and sometimes the community is going to be flexible as well. So I'm sure amongst the four of us as presenters, we've had people reach out to us through the Slack channel as well. Sometimes people are looking for specific roles, even if they don't sort of fit my model. I know that I may know people from events I've been to who I can introduce them to. So it's never just if I go to a pre-sales collective event, I'm going to become a pre-sales engineer. It's if I go to a data event and have like exact same story of going to a cybersecurity event, and that's how you find the pre-sales collective. The paths can become entwined, and that's how you evolve into your full future self.
Great thoughts.
Those,
And
those,
Aditya, I think, yeah, you had some last
yeah,
thoughts. Let's hit on that and then get to our audience Q&A.
Yeah, such a great point, Alex. I think I'm going to leave those last thoughts because I want to build up on what Alex said, because that was so pertinent to this. Is that, again, goes back to being your authentic and genuine self and letting your personality flow into becoming, helping you on the pre-sale side. So as he mentioned, run clubs, right? You're passionate about something, does not have to be a conference, does not have to be a work user group, does not have to be something that's work related. Just let your person be open to conversations. Just like a run club, there's a couple of run clubs here that I've tried out. I'm big into Olympic weightlifting, so that's a place where it's something that naturally those conversations can happen. So don't hold back, don't be that person who's talking shop all the time, but let it naturally flow. Bring your whole personality into conversations whenever you're meeting new people, sometimes there can be just that one little conversation that can spark a new discussion about something. So doing it from a professional angle is one thing, but then letting it happen from a personal angle is also something that you'd be surprised how organically that can flow. So that's all I had, because I know we have Q&A, so I want to leave time for that.
Amazing. Well, thank you for the structured discussion so far. We have a couple of questions to get started with, and I know we've got some great thoughts in the chat as well. So if there's anything burning from the audience, feel free to drop it in that Q&A. But this is, I guess, a very open-ended and interesting question to start off for you guys. What traits should we showcase within the team or to the external team to actually brand yourself? So getting to that granular level of like, what are the kinds of traits we should be showcasing?
So this is going to sound like a more of a McKinsey answer, but you should reflect on yourself first. I know the same new manager has just come in, is interested in us doing something called DISC profiling, which looks at like you're an introvert or an extrovert, you communicate in this way or that way. I'm sure people know like Myers-Briggs and these other profiles as well. It's not about trusting the result that comes out of that, but what it may well do is highlight to you in that sort of reflective pattern that these are the traits that I scored really high on. I should look at, I'm an extrovert. Okay, that means I'm probably someone who likes talking to people. I should make sure my brand is focused on connecting with people or teaching people. If I'm an intellectual, then I should be going out looking for traits that are going to showcase that. Like there's big news that's happening in my industry. Let's write a thought piece on LinkedIn. So if you can have those introspective moments, then that's probably going to give you a better idea of what traits to show versus looking through a list that says people really care about X, Y, and Z or Z, depending which audience I'm talking to. Because those traits, again, it's bring the real you. But part of that does require looking in and finding which sort of parent abstract area is going to be the best place to start to highlight the key ones. I think Tina's also come off mute and probably has a...
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. So we use something similar. We call it standout, but it does build on that same thing, but it looks at your strengths. So, and your strengths are what bring you joy, for lack of a better word, at work and in your life. And so that really gets at that intersection of what does the organization or industry need of me? What do I bring to the table? And then that intersection is yourself. So if somebody needs actual words, right, it's things like integrity, it's things like influence, it's things like problem solving. Those are some traits that you would look at, but you do have to tie them based on what your individual traits are to really what's being asked of you as well. So for me, my standout roles are advisor and creator. And creator doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a creative person, but it does mean that I like to solve problems and I can see the forest for the trees. And then I really like telling people what to do with that information. And so I am best suited for roles where I can provide advice on how to fix problems and move a deal forward, for example.
I want to tie this into another question we also got. So that's traits. I think the three of you have done a great job talking about how to bring your authentic selves in. And we've got a question. How do you determine what aspects of your life to incorporate into your personal brand? So going beyond traits, but what about your interests and how do you tie that in?
I could take a stab at that. Just think of it this way. If somebody was to ask you an interview question, as in the first question usually is that, tell me something about yourself, right? What would you squeeze into that probably 30-second response? What are those main things that you want to shout out about yourself that you're proud of, right? Is that, I want this person who's never met me before, I want them to know this, this, and this about me. So something like that, just take that as a foundational point, and then obviously be sure that you can utilize that within that workplace that you're targeting. Yep. That's the only way to do it. It's a case by case, right? There's some skills like somebody was mentioning, being an extrovert. I think it was Alex, right? About an example that he was pointing out. Something like that, you could obviously when there's meetings internally at that workplace, right? You can really have that trait of yours shine sometimes by contributing, by being by contributing to conversations, things like that. So again, things like if somebody asks you, hey, tell me a quick introduction of yourself, who are you as a person? The things that you would point out in that response, those are the things that define you and that you want people to see at the very start of things. So
yeah, I think the interview framing is actually maybe the best possible way you could make the choice. I mean, if anyone's had to do the situation, task, action, response sort of interview training at some point when they graduated, the best examples you could give were probably not work related when you're a recent graduate. They were probably things from your personal life. So the way I've often looked at pre-sales is we're professional storytellers. A lot of that is going to be talking about customer success stories, but it can also be parables. Like, how do I explain this technical challenge to an executive audience? They do not understand our technical product. They do understand how they use their iPhone every day. So in that exact same frame of reference, if you're going to use a parable to tell a story about how your technology works, then that's probably a good bit of your personal life to bring into the brand. You're a caring father, you're a sports person, you are an engineer outside of work. People are going to understand a story better if they're hearing that sort of compelling backstory that sits beneath it. And that they're the good points to kind of highlight along the way as well.
Well, that sounds great. We have one question that didn't get answered here, but I see our time is nearly up. So perhaps we'll drop an answer about portfolios in the Slack chat. And yeah, it looks like Alex is actually going to type something up there. So thank you again to the panelists. It's been an amazing discussion. And over to you, Courtney.